Vince Gill has the best voice in country music, received 22 Grammys, and had 21 number 1 hits. Many individuals, I believe that to be true. However, he married Amy Grant in 2000, which caused him to be disliked by half of his admirers. This is referred to as adultery by Christians, and the two had recently split up. People protested at his gigs with hate signs, and their music was removed off the radio. 25 years later, health issues still exist. The 67-year-old man who had it all is watching it all disappear. On April 12, 1957, Vince Gill was born in Norman, Oklahoma. He was raised in a household where the law and music coexisted in the most peculiar way. His father was a bluegrass superstar who played the banjo, guitar, and harp, in addition to being a federal judge. After court, Judge Gill would occasionally play music with his wife Jiren, who played the harp before they went to bed. Their music used to play in the hallway while Vince laid in bed. Locals vividly recall the summer evenings when the streets were filled with the sounds of guitars and harmonicas. Vince's soul was deeply impacted by this peculiar combination of trial tension and porch-picking joy, but growing up wasn't simple. Vince's eyes were improperly aligned from birth. It was a serious issue that required 2 grueling procedures to resolve. After that, he continued to shift his left eye when he was irritated or exhausted. Ultimately, he stated that he began wearing spectacles to conceal the injured eye, in addition to improving his vision. Porchmonate, his childhood pals teased him so much that he stopped talking to people. Instead, he stayed at home and played his guitar. Instead of fleeing the world, he was creating a new one. When Vince was 10 years old, a horrible incident occurred. Outside of Oklahoma City, Bob, his half-brother, was involved in a horrific vehicle accident on a wet highway. Before his brain injury became so severe that he was unable to even recall people's names, Bob was a bright student and a possible athlete. For over 25 years, Bob required full-time care. In order to pay for everything, Judge Gill had to take on more legal work. Because of the stress, Vince witnessed his parents' marriage disintegrate. In 1993, Bob finally died of a heart attack brought on by his wounds. That agony was constant for Vince. Years later, he claimed that those experiences taught him what it was like to truly lose something. His tunes were painful, the kind that make people sob silently in their vehicles. Vince took up his grandmother's old acoustic guitar when he visited her when he was 5 years old. After that, he began to play Old Shep. After half an hour, he had mastered the chords and began to sing. Shocked, his grandma called Vince's parents to inform them that she had witnessed something out of the ordinary. By the time Vince reached 10, his family had saved up enough cash to purchase a Gibson ES-435. In 1967, it was valued roughly $800, or $6,500 now. It was a statement rather than merely a present. Vince wasn't a child with a pastime, he was a vocalist. He used music as an escape when times were hard. Vince buried himself in his guitar instead of acting out at home. He played in the basement for 6 to 8 hours every day, generally by himself. Friends and family claimed to have heard melancholy, poignant music echoing through the walls. Vince's music teacher later described his playing as having a deep, melancholy sound that was far above his years. He turned suffering into music rather than discussing it. In high school, Vince started a bluegrass band called Mountain Smoke. On March 4, 1976, odd things happened. They opened for Kiss. Yes, Kiss, the makeup-wearing rock monsters. The audience at the Oklahoma City Fairgrounds was unsure on how to react to the bluegrass musicians. They sought fire and leather. Instead, they were handed banjos and violins. Crowd members jeered. They hurled mugs. Shoes were also thrown by someone. Vince snapped. He mooned the audience, ignored them, and left the stage. It was terrible to recall, humiliating, and honest. After that, the band disbanded, but Vince persisted. He joined the Bluegrass Alliance after moving to Kentucky. By 1977, he was playing with the teenage Ricky Skaggs in a band called Boone Creek. The bluegrass scene was elevated by them. Although the band didn't last long, their sound helped create a new genre by fusing traditional bluegrass with a contemporary twist. One of that band's songs from 1977 is a huge hit with someone. It is still discussed by some as though it were a treasure map. Vince packed up and headed west later that year. He joined Sundance, a band fronted by the renowned fiddler Byron Berlin, in Los Angeles to start his adventure. Berlin was serious. He had performed with the Flying Burrito Brothers and Bill Monroe. Beauty was what he sought. Vince picked it up fast. Rails and Pabon Samo de Ran, the Reckless, performed at the Palomino Club, one of LA's most well-known venues, and socialized with celebrities like Linda Ronstadt and Emmylou Harris. Vince was performing with Grammy Award winners less than a year after being jeered off the stage. To recover like that requires a great deal of courage. Pure Prairie League was disbanding in September 1978. Their lead singer Lawrence Goshorn has recently departed to form a new band with his brother. With none of its original members left, the organization was struggling to survive. To find someone who could continue the music, they conducted interviews. At that point, a young bluegrass singer named Vince Gill returned to their life. Gill and his band Mountain Smoke performed in front of the Pure Prairie League in Oklahoma City 2 years prior, in 1976. He immediately caught their attention. Despite only being 19, his abilities were evident. At the time, they offered him a job, but he declined as bluegrass remained his passion. In 1978, he performed in Los Angeles with Sundance and Byron Berlin. One night, he performed with Pure Prairie League once more. Within hours, they offered him the position. This time, he said yes. Vince Gill replaced him as lead singer, and the band's sound man Jeff Reeder recalls it vividly. "We saw him play in 1976, but he was busy with bluegrass. When he came back in 1978, we knew he was the one. He played the guitar, banjo, fiddle, and any other stringed instrument in addition to singing. At age 21, he was more visible to the public than ever before. The band was working at Criteria Studios in Miami on their next album, Can't Hold Back, in or around 1979. This is their first album together, despite Gill being a full-time member. When he was there, everything was different. Something was added by the emotive and fluid tone of his voice. Additionally, he began penning songs that blended pop and country styles. The record wasn't a huge hit, but it gave the band new vitality. As longtime band member Michael Riley put it best, he was a breath of fresh air. For Vince, it was the beginning of something far greater. Then 1980 arrived. Everything blew up at that point. The band released Firing Up, which had their biggest hit to date, Let Me Love You Tonight. The album peaked at number 10 on the Billboard Hot 100. Gill performed alone, and his voice carried the entire song. Even the legendary jazz saxophonist David Sanborn was invited to perform. It was new, slick, and catchy. Vince continued after that. The music had evolved, and in addition to I'm Almost Ready, he penned 5 other songs for that record. She's All Mine, You're My True Love, Lifetime of Nighttime, I'll Be Damned, and Jan Lou. Vince Gill was in charge of the transformation, which had made it softer, smoother, and more country pop. However, runs don't always last. In 1981, Something in the Night was released. Despite having a little hit with Still Right Here in My Heart, it didn't have the same impact on listeners as the previous album. Behind the scenes, things didn't go well. After going out of business, their record label Casablanca Records was acquired by Polygram. The new owners dropped the majority of the team, including Pure Prairie League. Due to their poor sales and lack of a record label, the band was trapped. Bassist Jeff Wilson and singer Vince Gill left in early 1982. When Gill joined RCA Records, he was already a well-known solo vocalist. He was replaced by Gary Burr, but the team had lost its focus, and the magic was vanished. Vince was just starting out on his own, but his days with the band were finished. Simultaneously, something else occurred that would permanently alter his life. Vince met Janice Oliver while he was in California, trying to establish his music company. She was a member of Sweethearts of the Rodeo, a country band. They became friends after meeting through the music scene, but things soon became serious. In 1980, they were married. 2 years later, on May 5, 1982, their daughter Jennifer Jiren Gill was born. Vince Gill sensed that something significant was going to occur. He was certain that his solo career was ready to take off because his song Let Me Love You Tonight was gaining spins. Gill declined Roger Crowell's invitation to join his band, the Cherry Bombs. He was going to do it alone. However, there are some cruel people in the music industry. As the year progressed, he made less improvement. He stopped getting concerts, his songs didn't make the charts, and he began to distrust himself. In the conclusion of the year, Gill was struggling. He therefore gave Crowell another call at the beginning of 1983, said yes, and joined the Cherry Bombs. It was the best course of action for him. This was no ordinary backup band. Among the most significant members of the group were Tony Brown and Emery Gordy Jr. Later, the sound of country music would be influenced by their names. The band was constantly on the road and performed at around 200 performances annually. I learned a lot from hard labor. Gill developed his guitar skills, gained stage confidence, and formed connections that would benefit him throughout his life. He learned how to succeed in the industry by playing the long game, rather than aiming for fame. That following year, Vince did something courageous. He moved to Nashville with his wife Janice and their little daughter Jennifer, leaving everything behind in Los Angeles. It wasn't thrilling. Obtaining funds was challenging. Vince did any job he could find while they were renting a modest home. Crowell's then-wife, Roseanne Cash, employed him to play guitar at one of her jobs. That excursion became his classroom in 1983. Cash's band was tough, tight, and well-tuned. Vince had to mature both at home and on stage. Being a father, having late-night rehearsals, and not knowing when I would be paid was difficult. However, he became stronger, smarter, and more focused throughout his months in Nashville. He used to play with Tony Brown in the Cherry Bomb, and Brown was moving up in Nashville at the same time. By 1984, Brown had taken over A&R at RCA Records. Vince was not forgotten by him. He put up a lot of effort behind the scenes because he believed Gill had something unique. Brown did all in his power to get RCA's Joe Galante to play Vince's songs. Because of his diligence, Gill was able to secure a solo contract with RCA in early 1984. Not only was competence crucial, but friendship essential as well. Brown risked everything to demonstrate his belief in Gill's ability to succeed. Vince took advantage of the opportunity. His debut solo recording was an EP consisting of 6 songs titled Turn Me Loose. In February 1984, it was released. Of the tracks, 3 made it into the top 40. At number 34, the song Victim of Life Circumstances peaked. Although it wasn't very popular, people took notice since it was intriguing. At Nashville's Woodland Studios, Gill spent a lot of time working with excellent studio musicians. Extra songs were not what he wanted. Every second mattered to him. That dedication was evident. The EP demonstrated that Gill was more than simply another upbeat country vocalist. As a true artist, he was prepared for larger venues. That same year, things improved much more. On April 10, 1984, the Academy of Country Music named Gill the top new male vocalist. For a brief time, it appeared as though everything would finally come together. It was his first significant honor. But it took time to become famous. The Things That Matter, his subsequent album, was released in 1985. It wasn't powerful enough, but it was good. Between 1984 and 1988, not one of his songs was in the top 10. Gill continued to put up effort and improve, but the attention remained elusive. Still, I was reminded by that ACM award. He possessed the company's voice, abilities, and focus. Vince Gill was 32 years old and on the verge of oblivion when 1989 arrived. His songs weren't very popular, and RCA wasn't sure how to handle him. But Tony Brown wasn't finished yet. Brown, who is currently employed at MCA Records, made yet another significant offer. He persuaded the record label to sign Gill. There was a chance. Brown believed that because most labels were concentrating on younger musicians, Gill's best work was yet to come. He gave him a crew that got him a new sound and better songs. When I signed with MCA, it was more than just a new contract. It was a second opportunity. That opportunity immediately paid off. In October 1989, Gill released When I Call Your Name. Unlike anything else on the radio, it was unique. It featured rock, pop, country, and even folk music. It made its own and didn't care about trends. Songs like Reba McEntire's Oklahoma Swing contributed a more vintage vibe. Some, such as Never Knew Lonely, sounded more subdued and sentimental. However, the title track was the true star. Gill's message was unforgettable, sad, and pure as glass. The variety of styles appealed to them. They were unable to quit playing it, and Nashville residents started paying notice once more. When I Call Your Name created history in addition to being aired on the radio. On the Billboard country list, the single peaked at number 2. Not only was Vince Gill a well-known performer, but he was also becoming successful. At the 1990 CMA Awards, the song took home the Single of the Year trophy. The next year, it earned Gill his first Grammy for Best Male Country Vocal Performance. The song that nearly didn't make it out transformed his life. The timing of the voices, the production, and the intensity was ideal. Gill had arrived. In 1992, it sold over 1 million copies, earning it platinum status. A singer beyond 30 who hadn't had a smash hit rarely achieved that level of success. Platinum certification indicated that you were skilled at what you did, not just a number. The radio was always playing his song. He was sought after by music promoters. The man who was previously unable to secure a performance suddenly rose to prominence as one of the most popular country music acts. Not only did that record preserve his career, it transformed it. Gill remained socially active even after he rose to fame. He rose to become one of Nashville's top backup musicians. Big stars wanted him in the studio, not just because of his guitar skills, but also because of his harmony and feel. He continued to work with Reba, contributing guitar and vocals to her Sweet 16 album. He sang Emmylou Harris's Bluebird as a vocalist. He contributed to the 1990 release of Rosanne Cash's album Interiors. He was unexpectedly hired by Bonnie Raitt for her 1991 album Luck of the Draw. When Gill transitioned from country to rock to blues, he didn't lose a beat. In 1992-1994, Vince Gill was everywhere. His voice could be heard on award programs, country radio, and in crowded stadiums. In those 2 years alone, he had 4 consecutive #1 hits. I Still Believe in You was the first to be released in 1992. Don't Let Our Love Start Slipping Away and One More Last Chance followed in 1993. Trying to Get Over You was finally released in 1994. Every song peaked at the top of the Billboard Hot Country charts. It was no coincidence that Gill had discovered the ideal balance between new school polish and old school country heart. I Still Believe in You didn't only remain at the top of the charts, it was in the top 10 for 20 weeks. For Gill, it was a significant step in the country music industry. It was when he became an overwhelming star instead of just a well-known vocalist. By the conclusion of the decade, things started to alter. In 1998, A record titled The Key was released. It was different, which is why it sounded different. All of the songs he penned were extremely honest and dealt with the dissolution of his 17-year marriage to Janice Oliver. Songs like The Key to Life and Kindly Keep It Country stripped away the glitz and revealed a man experiencing pain and change. The music was well received by everybody who heard it. It was regarded by some as his most courageous piece to date. Although it didn't sell as well as his previous albums. For The Key, it wasn't just another hit. The conclusion of his most significant story and the start of a more intimate one marked a sea change. However, Gill's private life was not just influencing his music, it was also making headlines. His wife was Christian pop royalty Amy Grant. In 2000, they were married. By then, she had sold over 30 million songs and won 6 Grammys. Both stars' fans were taken aback. Gill's 1998 divorce had recently been verified. Gary Chapman was no longer Grant's spouse as of 1999. People looked twice at the timeline. They were both married to different people when they first met in 1993. There have been rumors that they were drawn to one another ever since. Both the Christian and country music industries were taken aback when they eventually announced their relationship to the public. Gary Chapman Raalish Mankerdam Sek Ras Mankertru People. It infuriated many of Grant's supporters. She represented good, pious music for many years. Her music was performed by youth groups and churches. She was a religious person in addition to being a singer. As a result, many of her Christian fans turned against her after her divorce, and new marriage were made public. Some radio stations that played her music were even shut down. Some claimed to have felt as though they were mourning for her soul. The response revealed a more profound reality. When a religious leader demonstrates their humanity, the pedestal can be readily toppled. Then, in 2013, the past made a significant reappearance. Vince Gill was scheduled to make an appearance at the Kauffman Center in Kansas City. Outside the site was an irate group of Westboro Baptist Church members. Not only were they protesting, but they were also denouncing his marriage to Grant, despite the fact that it had occurred years prior, with their signs reading, "God hates adultery," and "Vince Gill took another man's wife." Many well-known individuals would have disregarded them. Gill wasn't. He approached them directly rather than avoiding them. He approached the demonstrators and had a direct conversation with them. "What are you doing with another man's wife? Don't you know that divorce plus remarriage equals adultery?" Someone shouted at Gill, but he remained static. He responded, "Jesus also talked a lot about grace and forgiveness. That's not what you guys have." The entire incident was captured on camera and went viral very fast. His bravery was praised by his admirers. Others commended him for his fair and honest handling of hate. In 2020, Vince Gill and his spouse, Amy Grant, visited a physician. For some reason, both of them were tagged for additional testing, even though it was intended to be a routine visit for her. At that point, Gill discovered he had an uncommon cardiac condition known as PAPVR, or partial anomalous pulmonary venous return. Less than 1% of people are aware that they have it. For decades, certain veins in his lungs were directing oxygen-rich blood to the incorrect side of his heart, causing it to work harder than it had to. He didn't know what was happening. He had survived all this time, but it might have resulted in sudden cardiac collapse. Just a few weeks later, life struck her again. Amy and Gill both required open heart surgery shortly after one another. Amy entered first, followed shortly by Gill. This occurred when hospitals refused to admit patients during the pandemic. As a result, they were improving alone rather than supporting one another. Those were some of the most lonely days of Gill's life, he subsequently said. However, he claimed that seeing Amy at last felt like a weight being lifted. Together, they endured a year of suffering, surgeries, and quiet. Then tragedy struck once more in 2022. Amy crashed while riding her bike close to a Nashville golf course after making a mistake turn. After being struck, she was unconscious for 10 minutes. She suffered a significant brain injury by the time aid arrived. She had trouble remembering things, and soon after, physicians discovered a mass developing in her throat. She had to undergo 5 hours of surgery to remove it since it was so severe. After that, she was unable to sing as well as she once could. She had problems walking straight, so she laughed that she felt inebriated even though she wasn't. Amy, however, who was usually resilient, persisted. She compared herself to an old car that had been painted over and damaged. He was with her all the time, Vince. In early 2023, Gill was forced to miss 3 major performances. He did it because Amy needed him, not because he wanted to relax. After the bike accident and the throat surgery, she had a difficult time recovering. According to Vince, they appeared to be experiencing a string of unfortunate events. However, he remained by her side, prioritized her health, and supported her during the most trying times. His admirers said it was true love at work and applauded him. However, Gill also experienced health issues unrelated to any of this. His vocal cord polyps made it difficult for him to sing. In order to continue doing what he loved, he underwent surgery and rehabilitation. His back pain persisted for a day after that, forcing him to switch his diet and attend physical therapy. Things deteriorated due to his arthritis, and he was forced to reduce his travel, but he didn't stop. He adapted to it, found methods to get around it, and continued on. A 75-year-old woman called Joyce then unexpectedly sent an innocuous comment on Vince Gill's Instagram in late 2022. She merely hoped he would visit Boston as a fan. The next event was a nightmare. She was personally contacted by scammers posing as Gill. They told her they loved each other and moved the conversation to Telegram. Over the course of nearly a year, Joyce sent them her entire life savings, or over $450,000. They informed her that Gill needed money to settle an attack allegation, that Amy had locked his assets, and that he was divorcing. Every time she stopped, it became more difficult for her. She planned to move to be with him because she believed they were married. Joyce's daughter tried to stop it, and social workers did too. But the scam artists had fully tricked her. Her mind was unable to see the truth despite her advanced age and memory issues. Joyce was financially and emotionally destroyed when the truth was revealed, and the money was gone. At last, Vince Gill's group took over. Anyone claiming to be Vince Gill online was categorically not, according to a general caution. His accounts were managed by his employees, and he never sent fans private messages. However, the harm had already been done. There were other cases similar to Joyce's. It was among the most depressing. In May 2025, Vince experienced yet another health concern. This time, the pain was so severe that he had to visit the hospital. He was forced to miss performances in Birmingham and St. Louis. His daughter Jenny told fans that although it had been frightening, he was improving. Known for always being there, Gill had to retreat once more. The supporters understood. To remind everyone that the man behind the fame had been through a lot, several individuals posted words and prayers on social media. In spite of his numerous issues, Vince was not slowing down. In May 2025, he embarked on his largest summer tour in years. Since he had left Oklahoma to pursue his ambitions 50 years prior, this tour was unique. The tour would visit over 30 communities before concluding with 4 heartfelt nights at Nashville's Ryman Auditorium, Gill's favorite location. Even though he had performed there over 100 times, this solo visit was unique. It was a victory celebration. By 2025, Vince Gill had become more than simply a country music sensation. He returned to the stage with an open heart despite having experienced tragedy, serious illness, and supporting his wife throughout her darkest moments. His voice, which had been repaired and maintained in good condition, was still as strong as ever, and his shows were packed. He also didn't come on this tour alone. Gill assembled an 8-piece band with some of Nashville's top musicians, such as Jim Moose Brown on keys, Wendy Motton's wall-shaking vocals, and Tommy Bukovac on guitar. Some of the biggest personalities in the industry had performed with this band. They weren't only background music, they shared a same ancestor. They got along great on stage. They joked, shared solos, and supported one another, just as Gill had done for everyone around him over the last few years.